Okay.
Thank you.
Ready, Mike? All right, it's 6 o'clock, so let's begin our March 17th, 2014 Acton School Committee Budget Meeting. Glad to have everybody here again tonight. And Mr. Aldrich has some materials that he's going to distribute. Here you go.
She's humming Danny Boy.
All right, the moment we have more, so we'll get to that.
Okay, we'll start our meeting by asking Kim to go over and answer any questions that were raised at our meeting on 3/11, please. Want to wait for, oh, he's right there. What, did you have any, were there anything needed to be addressed?
Everything that I was asked, I think I addressed.
You
Well,
addressed?
to me, but
Yeah.
it might be, well, okay. I'll just summarize and say that there was a question about the Article 6,
The stipends.
bill stipends.
We had, I'll just real quick, we
Yeah.
had, in this year, we had a couple new stipends. One was for the instructional strategist, and then we had some for some team leaders that what was in the budget and what we, I guess what was expressed to them were not quite the same numbers. So those two particular areas, we budgeted out of the grant. And because the instructional strategist is one that we want to keep going, we moved that over to the operating budget, which is part of Article 6. And the differences that were missed, I guess, last year was also moved over to the operating budget. It's a lot better to have stipends and any type of pay coming out of our operating than it is to come out of the grant to avoid the 13.5%. Other questions you asked?
The 40,000 was changed for the
For the,
one
yeah, it-
possible special needs
Right.
students.
but that 40,000, even though it was put in the budget itself, it's actually coming out of undesignated funds. It's not going to be raised. I do have, do you want me to pass these out? These are all the articles with the summary on it.
After we have my overview, then we'll pass those out.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
And the only other question was really a matter of, I think, the change from 7 to 9.5%.
Right.
And specifics for each line item, how that ties into the budget. And I believe you'll answer all of that with those papers in front of you.
Yep.
Does that take care of everything from our last meeting?
From last meeting, I think so, yes.
Okay.
Unless any of the other folks in here have something else that they need to call.
Okay, then I'm going to turn it over to our superintendent now, who's going to give us a little budget overview. And
All right, this is the 6th meeting, and they've all been, I think, quite productive. And one of the things that I said to the board in my report to them, that I gave them to them Thursday, the 6 meetings have allowed us to double check, triple check, quadruple check, and quintuple check, and now sextuple check all the figures, so that we feel extremely positive about how accurate our data is, more so than we even thought in the beginning. We thought we had done a pretty good bit of budgeting when we gave the board something, we gave the school committee something on the 28th of January. But since then, the 6 meetings have been good for all of us, I think. And so what I have here is a summary of where we are today and what we are recommending as administrators to the board, to the school committee. Now, if anyone was here at my presentation on the 28th of January, you saw a PowerPoint presentation that had these types of pages. Well, first page, budget by article, shows that, as I said last week about the largest category, which is Article 2, it's 51% of the budget, and Article 3 is 18% of the budget. These numbers are Articles 2 through nutrition, and these numbers show you where we are confident that we can go next year and provide the services that are absolutely necessary for the students, and also make sure that the tax implications are positive for the voters. So if we look, that's a budget that I'm presenting again tonight. The first budget that I presented back on the 28th of January was just under $5,050,000. This one is $5,096,000. Several things have happened since the one we prepared then. One is that the medical insurance rates are higher by about 2.5%, and also we do have some concerns about a particular case that may come our way in special ed. So a combination of those two things bring us to this number. So if we look at the second page, then we'll be checking the articles off as we have been talking about them for the last 6 weeks. Regular instruction, we're recommending $2,582,006, and that's a 0.2% increase. Special ed, Article 3, we're recommending a figure of $914,346, which is a 6.4% decrease. Article 5, other instruction, which is basically stipends and athletic costs, and that number we're suggesting 42,545, or a 4.3% reduction. And then student staff support, which is library and other things, tech, that we're suggesting almost funding it exactly the same as last year, only about 2,000 less, 366,766, or 0.5 or half of 1%. Now, system administration, which is my budget, we're suggesting that can be done at 216,873, or a reduction of 1.4%. School administration, which is principal and the office, we're suggesting that be 174,805, or an increase of 2.3%. Student transportation at 252,610 is 1.6% less. Operations maintenance, which is Article 10, it comes in at 422,524, or 4.4% less. No debt service. And nutrition, we're recommending that it be 123,778, or an 8.6% reduction. So the total last year was $5,192,073. This year we're recommending $5,096,253, or a 1.8% reduction in the dollars to be spent on the budget. So if you look at the next page in your file, it's one thing to need $5,096,000 to manage the district and provide the education that our students deserve and is necessary to move forward. We also do have some revenue that we can account for. So this page, revenue, shows the state aid estimated at $397,192, the nutrition reimbursement at $70,000, federal aid, Medicaid at $15,000, so that's a figure of $482,192 in offsetting revenue. And then we're asking the board, the school committee, to consider transfer of a fund balance of $40,000 from last year. There was a request for $120,000 in fund balance, which it appears will not have been used. And this year, we're suggesting for the next year a $40,000 transfer from fund balance to take care of a special ed need if it comes about. That would give us revenue of $522,192. So if we look now at the next page, if we have a budget requirement of $5,096,253 and revenues of $5,522,192, that means that we have to raise in taxes $4,574,061. Now, if you notice, we had a decrease of 1.85% in the budget request over last year. We're also suggesting that the tax increase, or the tax amount that we're going to ask the voters for, is 1.67% less than last year. Next. So the final page, the state essential programs and services reporting. If we identify the EPS at $14,946 per student, then the state expects us to spend on our students $3,658,879. But since our budget is $1,317,000 higher than that, then we're suggesting that the amount of monies that we need to raise are above the EPS are $1,317,098. So that is the overview. And unless you have some questions, what we need to do now is
Yes, we do
pass
have
out.
one question.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Why is the per student EPS or whatever it is so much higher in Acton than it is for the rest of the state?
Why is ours more?
Yes.
It's purely the fact that we have 200 students, and we operate a K through 8 building, and there are no efficiencies. We are doing our best this year, and that's one of the reasons we're reducing our budget in order to try to be more efficient. But this is a question that's asked year after year, long before I was here, and we value the caliber of the education and the achievements that come from the K through 8 program here. And given that the state feels that we are a very viable organization and has given us what's called a donut hole exclusion, so we don't have to be part of a MSAD or a conglomerate of other schools. This is one of the costs of being providing all the services possible for a small number of students.
Do you ever think there'll be a cutoff when it's not worth it? Do you foresee that happening?
I can't envision that.
I think
We're gonna
what's,
close the school?
I think what's happening here, if we look at what the EPS is, had we, for some reason, entered into an agreement, like a school with another school, an RSU or ALS or something like that, the town would probably be spending more than what we're spending now.
I
And
was
we'd
just
still have
wondering-
the same number of students, but we wouldn't be able to decide where we're gonna make these cuts, and we wouldn't be able to make all the curriculum choices and things as a district. So,
But if the number of students keeps going down, what would be a hypothetical cutoff? I mean, when does it not?
I think
Seem
it's
to be.
it's a formula set by the state for every district, so until that formula changes.
Doesn't it also have something to do with evaluation of the town? The town evaluation?
I think the other question would be, what would be the alternative?
Oh, I don't know. I was
And that's when but I'm saying that's why it's a hard question to answer. Giving up our school, sending kindergartners to Sanford, so I can't see that being worth it. So I think it's a legitimate question that doesn't have a specific answer because we wouldn't know what are the alternatives. If we don't take care of our kids here, who will? So it becomes
There's still a cost related to that, though.
But
No matter where
again,
you send them.
Right, where do you send them, and would that cost, not just financially, but the other impacts of making these decisions? I think it's an absolute unknown. We can't imagine an alternative that's better than servicing our kids here. So I don't think there's an exact answer. But it's a concern that we're always aware of. How do we give the best to our kids at a price that's affordable? I think it's a legitimate question. The difference also is, you know, whether you have 20 or 24 kids in a class, whether you have 15 or 18, you still have that one teacher. the ratio changes, you know, so you still have the cost of the one teacher. If you add in a few more students at every grade level, you still have that same teacher cost, and that's where the ratio changes for us, whereas another school district, it would be so minimum. We find the same thing in our data with our school scores. You know, when you're looking at different kneecap scores and things, when they say, you know, 20% of the kids, well, when you have a class size of 30, it's really not that many kids we're talking about. So the measurement is different. It's a hard question.
It also is affected by the valuation of the town itself, which, while those of us who live here don't think of ourselves as being particularly wealthy, Acton, by the state standards, is considered a wealthy community because of all the lake properties and things. So that figures into this formula too. Am I right on that, Jim? That figures into about, yeah.
Wasn't it also true that if we had joined Sanford, they were gonna lose $1,000, $1 million in state funding, plus $1 million we give them?
Right.
Because that, our tax base gone with theirs, they would've lost $2 million out of the budget, and it would have to be made up by the taxpayers.
Yeah, their 60% of their school budget is funded by the state. Ours is less than 10, 397,000 on 5.1 million. You can imagine how little that is.
And the town has voted over and over again through the SADs, RSU. When we wanted a donut hole, the town voted for $50,000 to fight the state in court. So the townspeople have fought over and over again and voted over and over again to support the school system the way it is. So I think you'll find that it'll take a lot to have the townspeople close the school down and say, okay, let's send our kids to Sanford or someplace else.
That's a long way to go for little kids.
Yeah, it is, it is. Well, it was a long way for the high school kids before we had to deal with Sanford going to Wells and going to,
And I think, you
One
know,
Eagle.
while it sounds like a lot of money, even though it's less than last year, if you look around the state and see what different districts are, why they're trying to pull out of the AOSs, because they're having to pay so much extra to educate kids in other towns instead of just their own. At least we know when we spend our money, it's on our Acton kids. And I think that's a real plus for us.
And we have something to say about it.
And we have some say
Local
about it.
control.
That's
Yeah,
Let's see.
if you look at the statistics by the state, and like you even compare the cost per student in Acton and Chapley, it's misleading because Chapley is part of a bigger district, and you still have to have a certain level of program plus your administration, and the fewer students you have, the higher the ratio is per student. And if you look through the state statistics, and the smaller number of schools, children in each district, the higher the cost.
Shapley's K6 and we're K8, that's a big difference.
Yeah.
But they're also a part of
RSU,
RSU 57.
Well, you know, there is another answer, but I think it's an unacceptable one to our town. Our kids started out being in grades with first and second, third and fourth, fifth and sixth. And, you know, the dilemma is telling people, at what point can you have a small group of kids without combining them? That has not been something that we've wanted to do. But when we talk about problem solving, it certainly is one of the alternatives. It just doesn't have to be one we choose to do.
Especially, I think, with the Common Core being implemented and with the change in the way education is being presented, I think the larger classrooms like that and the grade levels would even complicate that a little bit more.
Going with that thought, just out of curiosity, I've been thinking about this while we've been talking about the budget. You know, we used to have a multi-grade.
Multi-age.
Multi-age, I don't remember what you called it.
There's a 4 or 5 this year. It works to a certain degree. It takes a lot of dedication on the teacher's part and an understanding of how to handle that. So this year it's working very well, the 4th, 5th combined class, with one of our teachers, Brenna Whitney, but she also works closely with Sandra Packard, who's the 5th grade teacher. So there is a lot of sharing of instructional resources and regrouping. I think, again, you know, for anyone who hasn't been walking through the classrooms lately, I again invite and encourage you to come. We're asking teachers to do what we didn't ask teachers to do 20 years ago. So I think for us, for the staff, there's a lot of how can we do this better? How can we figure this out? They're aware of the shrinking numbers at certain grade levels, but what do you do when you have 15 one year and 30 the next, and you keep shuffling teachers and you shuffle curriculum? It's a lot to keep learning a new curriculum every year, 3, 4, 5 years in a row. So the teachers are also working together at brainstorming, how do we handle this? How do we make sure we don't lower our standards while we're accommodating this, strange and difficult phenomenon? When I arrived here a long time ago, we were on the opposite end. Every year there seemed to be a double class coming up through until eventually.
Yep.
So I think the teachers are very aware and are trying to use their best resources, which to me is themselves, to accommodate this. But it's not easy. To have the class sizes go up and down, 2 teachers one year, 1 teacher the next, it's a stressful time as well. And the expectations of what they're supposed to be doing with the students are not decreasing. We all hear those conversations in and outside of schools. It's more than just money. It's a tough conversation we're having often.
David?
Acton's had a long history of independence. I mean, this is what got us here as a little K-8 school to begin with when we didn't join the SADS back 50 years ago or so. And I know when I was this last round, when I was the chairman of the reorganization planning committee, which was looking into all of the consolidation things, and I know the state pushed us towards Wells, and then they pushed us towards, can you believe it, in their infinite wisdom, they pushed us towards Kittery, because Kittery didn't have a partner, so Wells and Kittery were the closest to us. So can you imagine us consolidating? And really, this was the consultant from the state was pushing, if Wells is looking like they're not going to be really receptive to it, why don't you guys consider Kittery? And to me, it just seems absolutely, that's so ridiculous, Acton and Kittery an hour away from each other, consolidating as one district. So they were really reaching for that, obviously. But one of the big things that I noticed when I was on that committee was there were a lot of people that obviously were very passionate about the school, but there were some people that didn't really have any ties to the school, but they were passionate about us not consolidating just because of local control. They valued our local control so greatly that, especially when they looked at the numbers would potentially be, close, or as Judy said, more expensive to join. And as we're seeing in a lot of the RSUs now are having issues with some of that type of thing. That was something that kind of overwhelmed me, that there were people that were jumping on as far as us staying independent as a school district, simply because this meant really jeopardizing our long history of local control. So it is a far-reaching topic in Acton, and one that goes in a way really beyond our little school as well.
Thank you.
Holly?
I'm just curious, so the state identifies it as $14,946. If we accept the additional dollars, what is the EPS per child? What does it turn out to be?
I don't have a calculator with me, but,
If there are 200 students for this budget, it's about $25,000.
right, roughly.
Oh,
That's
6,700. I did that calculation.
Well, you have to figure in your high school students as well
Yeah.
into that formula,
And I'm only
because we're
looking at
also
schools, yeah.
figuring our high school tuition
it's
is
16,000
included as a part of the
Yeah,
budget.
25,000 sounds
Yeah.
way too much.
It would-
16.
You'd have to, because we're talking,
Put the high
mostly
school
on this
students.
budget, we're talking.
It's not just the
Except
200
for
here.
that, yeah, we're talking local, but.
So
The
really-
high school, this includes all of our high school kids as well. We keep saying what the numbers are here, but you have to remember that it also includes, how many high school kids?
120?
104 right now?
104 right now.
High school kids in addition to that, and their transportation, so.
So to keep the quality of education that we want, if Mary's correct with her numbers, it's a couple thousand more a student.
It's 16,000 something,
16,000
yeah.
compared to what they're saying, just about 15,000 to me. that's well worth it per student. I mean, that doesn't seem like, when you think about it per student, it's really not that much to keep, like you said, the control here, the quality that we want here.
The product.
16,700.
Nothing like this.
roughly.
And I think, I think all we have to do is look at where our students go when they leave here and how successful they are, just to support the fact that we do have a quality program going on here, so that they can leave here and go into a humongous school, like, from, compared to Acton, when they go into Sanford, and still they thrive there. So I think that speaks well of the fact that they're well prepared here, so.
I guess my point is, when you think of it per student, it really isn't that much more per student to give them what, as a town, we feel is necessary.
Yeah, but the EPS, did you ever look into that to see exactly what it entails? Like, it was the kindergarten, right? The EPS says you don't need the kindergarten, correct?
That's one of
So
the-
we supply a kindergarten, so that adds us over the state limit right there.
And
You know,
EPS
stuff like
says
that.
you don't
I
have
mean, there's
to-
a few things.
You don't have to transport your high school kids either. The EPS says that. So that's, if you add that onto it, it says you need like 2/3 of a position for something, the way they cut
Like
it
gifted
down.
and
So it's-
talented, I think.
Yeah, so
Different things.
it's just the state formula. We just look at it every year and write down the numbers because that's about all we can do with their EPS.
You're not entitled to a full principal right now.
If there are no other questions, we now would like to pass out the complete budget book,
So which 3%?
which has all the articles and all the numbers.
See if we can figure
It's
something
what we've
out.
been building for these 6 weeks.
See if they have good price.
Get rid of the head. I don't know what I'm doing anymore.
And we're going to vote on these tonight.
Well, this wasn't a workshop.
We're gonna bring each one, we're gonna vote on
But these two
Planting tomatoes.
took my nap tonight.
Say again? What?
Had my nap before I came up here.
I didn't, I'm not feeling good.
You don't sound good. Chihuahua woke me in full snore.
Do you have Chihuahua? The little dog's the biggest personality.
Do you think they're the same formula as the state main users? Oh, absolutely. It's pretty
Explain it to them.
pretty tough. It's gotten tighter and tighter. Well, it's, that's what exactly what it is. Anything below that you fail. So,
Yeah, just like when they came out with that, there were like 180 districts in the state, which like 160 of them were over.
Trish.
First time. Programs and services. Programs and services.
It's not contingent on their budget, it's just,
And I
it just doesn't
make it from
make up that 3% of my job.
There you go.
Meaning by definition.
I have a key.
It took me a minute.
Okay, what our process is gonna be now as we go through the warrant, because we've basically looked at all and had questions and answered questions, and decided as a board as we've gone along what we felt was acceptable and what wasn't. So what we're gonna be doing tonight as a board is voting on these articles so that the warrant will be approved by the school committee by the end of this meeting, and then turned over to the warrant and finance committee for their consideration. Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
I just have one question. Do you anticipate any unexpended funds this year?
I believe we're gonna underspend the budget because we also have more revenue, but I'll let Kim comment on that.
As it stands right now, yeah, of the 120 that we had set aside to pay for this fiscal year, I don't really think we'll be using it, but it's still only March, and we still have 3 more months to go. And I'll leave it at that.
So that might be
It might.
unexpended.
There might
still.
be things that come up that we're unaware of, or,
Well, what happened with the maintenance issue?
yeah.
That's still in,
So that could cost us money? money we didn't budget, obviously.
It's going to inevitably, yes. How much, I don't know.
They don't know.
Not dramatic.
No.
No. And, I mean, there are certain things that were not budgeted for last year that I want to make sure we make it through as well. So, I can't answer your question.
Okay. I was just wondering if you knew.
Yeah,
Any other
it
questions
doesn't look,
before we
if everything
start?
goes good, I don't think so, but I'm gonna say that and something's gonna happen.
I know.
I know, you don't want to jinx it.
I know.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before we begin?
Begin what?
Begin going through the articles one by one, and the school committee is going to vote on each article as we go through.
Okay, so
And
you're
we'll-
planning on having the Article 14 discussion after the motion?
When we get
get
to
to
Article 14, yeah?
Thank you.
Okay? And anywhere along the line, if any of these articles, if any of you have any questions as we go along that haven't been brought up, or something you thought about in between, then that would be the time to do it.
Do you have more of those that you have?
This, no, she only has,
Kim, you got more of these?
I can
What is
print
that?
out a bunch.
Yeah, that'd be great.
You
Oh,
really
the
want-
board doesn't have any?
No,
No.
that'd be great.
we also need to have one for you so that you can keep track of this.
I
Right.
can, I'll just write it on mine, that's fine.
All right, okay.
Who
So-
you mean?
So, yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
So we'll make up,
Do you need copies or something? Yeah. want me to-
But you do have your budget figures, and you have your articles and your sheets and your accompanying material to go with it. So, we're starting with Article number 2, which says, to see what sum the town of Acton will authorize the school committee to expend for regular instruction. School committee recommends $2,582,006.
I'll make a motion to accept the article as written.
The article is to see what the town will raise. We need to mention the sum that, Mary.
The article has no
Article-
sum in it.
It has,
Accepted as
It
written.
does not have a sum. The motion was to.
so
adopt-
to, my motion is to accept the article of $2,582,606.
To recommend.
to recommend, yes.
Right.
To
We need to
recommend.
recommend to the school committee.
What I said was, the school committee recommends, and then I gave
I'm
the
sorry.
figure.
Yeah.
I didn't hear you say.
You could get it
I thought you read the article.
Okay, and I'll
Okay,
second
I'll
that.
shut up.
Okay, it was moved by Mary and seconded by Jeanette that we recommend the amount of $2,582,006 for Article 2. Any discussion? None? All those in favor? Article 3. To see what sum the town of Acton will authorize the school committee to expend for special education. The school committee recommends $914,346.
I'll make a motion to accept $914,346.
To recommend.
I'll second that.
Mary and Jeanette. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Article 4, to see what sum the town of Acton will authorize the school committee to expend for career and technical education. School committee recommends 0. This doesn't really apply to us because we're only a K-8 school.
Can I ask a question here? You're reading a warrant that talks about school committee recommendations that haven't actually been made yet. Is that
We're making
valid?
the recommendations
I know, but
tonight.
you're reading them in order to vote on them. Is that valid? Just a
Yeah,
question.
that's how we do it.
Why not? I mean, we've gone over each article
Well, I know,
separately.
just in terms of, typically, if we're doing a warrant and we're making a recommendation, if something has already been officially recommended at a meeting, we know what they recommended. But in this case, your reading is actually including a dollar amount as the school committee recommendation, when that school committee recommendation hasn't actually been made yet. I know that we've talked about the budget and everything, but, and
Okay.
perhaps I'm
Well-
just going off in left field here,
Okay, well,
but
the
just thought I'd
process,
mention it.
the process is that we are making our recommendations tonight. That's what we're doing as a board,
Understood.
following our discussion for the previous weeks of the various articles.
Mhm.
We'll make our recommendation, and then next week, you will go over them, and your board will make your recommendations.
Understood.
So-
Would not the dollar amount be the job of the person making the motion and not reading
Mary-
it off the warrant that you have in front of you,
Mary-
is my question.
Mary did that on the last motion, she did it correct, she did it correct, so.
She read it.
She got it. She read it in, I think,
This, I'm just doing it the way we've done it since
Yeah,
I've
and
been on the
That's
either
board.
fine.
way, the dollar amount is, the
Feel
dollar
free to
amount's
continue.
being mentioned, Judy. Either way is,
We're not at the level of warrant yet. Is that right?
This is the one.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody want to make a recommendation of $0 for Article 4?
Yes, I recommend $0 for Article 4.
I'll second that.
Kevin. All those in favor?
Agree with that.
Article 5, to see what sum the town of Acton will authorize the school committee to expend for other instruction. I would look for a motion that the school committee recommends $42,545.
Yes, I'll make a motion to recommend $42,545.
I'll second that.
Been moved by Mary, seconded by Jeanette. Any discussion? All in favor? Article 6, see what sum the town of Acton will authorize the school committee to expend for student and staff support. I would look for a motion for the school committee to recommend $366,766.
I'll make a motion to recommend $366,766.
I'll second that.
Moved by Mary, seconded by Jeanette. Any further discussion? All those in favor? 5-0. Article 7, to see what sum the town of Acton will authorize the school committee to expend for system administration. Look for a motion for a recommendation from the school committee in the amount of $216,873.
I'll make a motion to accept $216,873 for Article 7.
I'll second.
Mary, Kevin? Any discussion on Article 7? System administration, all those in favor? Article 8, to see what sum the town of Acton will authorize the school committee to expend for school administration. I'll look for a motion for the school committee to recommend $174,805.
I'll make a motion to recommend $174,805 for Article 8.
I'll second.
Gotta change it, 6 copies.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
That's it.
Article 9, to see what sum the town of Acton will authorize the school committee to expend for student transportation. I'll look for a motion for the school committee to recommend $252,610.
I'll make a motion to recommend $252,610 for Article 9.
I'll second.
Kevin? Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? To see what sum, Article 10, to see what sum the town of Acton will authorize the school committee to expend for facilities maintenance. I'll look for a motion for the school committee to recommend $422,524.
I'll make a motion to recommend $422,524 for Article 10.
I second that.
Kevin, Mary and Kevin. Any discussion? All those in favor? Article 11, to see what sum the town of Acton will authorize the school committee to expend for debt service and other commitments. Look for a recommendation from the school committee of $0.
I'll make a motion to recommend $0 for Article 11.
Let's look at that.
Mary and Jeanette. Doesn't really require a lot of discussion. All those in favor? Article 12, to see what sum the town of Acton will authorize the school committee to expend for all other expenditures, including nutrition. I'll look for a motion for the school committee to recommend the amount of $123,778.
I'll make the motion to recommend $123,778.
Bill, second.
Mary and Kevin. Any discussion on Article 12?
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
I wasn't here when you went over it. How come it's going down? I know we've been going up in the amount of kids that have needed free lunch and everything. I just wanted to help them.
Kim can explain that to you.
When the budget was, when I requested the budget, I was just told, just add 3%. And at first I did, and then I kind of went back the last couple of years and looked at what was actually spent versus what was budgeted, and we were nowhere near. There was a big discrepancy, so I brought it back down to what it actually should be. And what I did was I took what we actually spent for the last 2 years, and then I did the 3% on that actual number and not the accumulated budgeted hours on those. So,
Thank you.
Okay, Article 12, any other discussion for Article 12? If not, all those in favor? Okay, Article 13 and 14, I'm going to ask Kim to do some explaining on Article 13 and 14, to do an explanation.
okay. I actually had to go to the state, and the state has an EPS calculation template. Because one of the things you have to figure out every year is whether we're over or under the EPS allocation. So you have to do this particular format to get that answer. And it's basically filling in the form the way it is. So from the ED 279, which is, everybody talks about the EPS calculations and stuff, and it's this 5-page sheet that you can get from the Department of Education website. And on section 4, there's certain numbers that actually have to come from the EPS to fill in this calculation. So from the ED 279, the first line is you put in what the state subsidy is. So on the last page, they give you the total of the state subsidy. So that was my first line that went in up on the top. And then when you get to the local taxes raised for education, you have to do a calculation based on they have an amount here that is required by the state from as far as the local contribution that the ED 279 requires you to do, which is line 50, which is the $3,258,184.73. To actually come up with, after you do that, you have to determine the local amount to raise in addition to their minimum standard. So to complete that calculation, and this took me a while. First, you take the total amount that you're requesting, which is our $5,096,253. We have to take out the total nutrition budget, which is Article 12, which is $123,778. From that gives you your total combined state and local of $4,972,475. From that number, you have to take out the state subsidy that they're giving you, the $397,192.39, and the amount required by the state and town, which again, those numbers came from the ED 279, of $3,258,184.73. And that difference is the additional amount that has to be raised by the town. So that Article,
14.
Article 14, that first part gives you, to see what the municipality will raise and appropriate in additional local funds, which is what we're recommending of the $1,317,098. It's from this calculation sheet. Then you have to kind of like do the opposite. Now you take your total budget and you're going to take out revenues to come up with the other portion that you need. So you take the total amount requested again, the $5,096,253. We're taking out the nutrition revenues, which is coming up later, which you're going to vote on for the $70,000, because we're basically going to get at least $70,000 in revenues. And you take out the state subsidy, and you take out the additional amount raised, and this is the amount to raise for the town's contribution to the total funding, which is the second number in Article 13. So that's your $3,311,962.73. So to make, then the other two numbers you come up with in Article 14 is when you do the calculations and you finish the EPS calculation template, it will calculate for you how much above or below the 100% EPS allocation that you have done with the numbers that, I know this sounds really complicated.
That you plug in.
Right, okay, so when I did the calculation, everything all said and done, the amount above the 100% EPS allocation total is $1,232,160. So that's your second number in Article 14, and your first number, the $1,317,097 in Article 14, is the amount that we raised above that's the additional amount of money we raised by the town. I know this is complicated.
Every year we hear the same story.
It took me a while to go through it and figure out what it was asking for.
They
So,
don't make it easy.
so to kind of summarize it back out again, what you're seeing in the Article 13, where it says to see what sum the municipality will appropriate for the total cost of funding public education from kindergarten to grade 12, as described in the Essential Programs and Services, i.e. EPS Funding Act, we have the first number, $3,658,879. That comes from the ED 279. And to see what sum the municipality will raise as the municipality's contribution to the total cost of funding public education from kindergarten to grade 12, as described in the Essential Programs and Services Funding Act in accordance with the Maine Revised Statutes Title 20A, Section 15688. That, and the school committee, as I'm asking for, is $3,311,963, which is basically what we're asking for, taking out nutrition, the expenditures, and also taking out the revenues, but also taking out revenues for EPS and the additional amount raised. That's how we come up with the $3,311,000. Okay. And then when we go into Article 14, the two numbers that are coming into play is to see what sum the municipality will raise and appropriate in additional local funds. So that's your $1,317,097. Again, the total amount requested, less the expenditures for nutrition, less the state subsidy, and less the amount required by the state from the town. So that's your additional. And then the $1,232,160, which is that exceeds the essential programs and services allocated by the model as required, is how the calculation template comes up with what is over the 100% allocation. Okay?
Amen.
Thank you.
This is ridiculous.
Everybody got that now?
Now,
Without
this
practice.
town, we would appreciate if, when is it, next year? When we want to vote this out.
Well, either Paul's disagreeing or he doesn't understand, so I
A
will,
little of both.
again,
Well-
a template is a template, and she's filled it out properly.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily need to go over what you just said, but I want to point out a few things. There is precedent for changing these formulas. In the 4 years that I'm aware of, two of them in the past, one that we're in now, and one that we're voting on. There has been one change from the fiscal year 2012 to 13. There was a change in the EPS calculations. I'm not privy to whether it was a change in an understanding of what the state wanted, or the state actually made a change. But there was a change. So for last year and the current year that we're in, from that change, we've had 2 years in a row where we use the same calculations. This coming year, for Article 14, we are using a different calculation. So that calculation, and by no means am I a bookkeeper, an accountant, any of that stuff, but, and by any means, I don't think Article 13 or 14 would be tackled by the sleight of heart. You know, they're complicated any way you slice them. What I am saying is that on Article 14, the calculations are different than they were in the current year and in the year past for the school committee. Moving on from there, last year when the warrant actually, after it was approved, it went to town hall. And Michelle took the warrant and said, okay, we need to figure out what this means to us. And she was looking for the net budget. And the net budget last year and the year before was the sum total of two of the figures that's on the warrant. This year, I don't see any means of taking the figures that are on the warrant and coming up with our net budget. So that sort of raises my skepticism. It doesn't mean it overrides what you're saying. It doesn't mean that what you're saying is not perfectly correct. But do with that as you will.
Okay.
You guys are, running the show. It's your warrant. And if those are the ways we calculate those numbers, then that's the way we're going to do it. I just want to point out those reservations.
Okay. I will say that I did talk with Bill Hall last Monday, and this is one of the things that I did go over with him to make sure I had done this correctly. This is actually new. And I know that Bill's not your auditor, but the other gentleman, when you guys get ready to do working with O'Donnell's and doing your taxes and all that type of stuff, these numbers will be used in your calculation to come up with it, but it'll also fall into a certain formula as well.
Yeah, the only thing I remember from the EPS changing over the last year, or in the years since I've been here, was the nutrition calculation.
Yeah.
We were making a
And that's what
mistake
this
by
is.
using it in two places, so we were double dipping. And that wasn't caught here by your accountant, it was caught by our accountant up there after that came up. But that was changed 2 years ago. The last 2 years, I know we haven't been doing that. That's the only change I know of. But, like Paul said, Michelle's the one that keeps an eye on all that. Once you guys get yours done, and she'll send it up and check it all over.
I guess, as a board, I think we need to commend Kim for going to the state template, number one, because it's a very difficult thing to try to figure out. If you go to the state template and you plug in the numbers that the state has given you, and then you plug in your own numbers that you come up with, then...
Well, that's another question. The raw numbers, I have like 5 numbers that I normally pull from the state spreadsheet, including the ED 279. And actually, it could even be 4 because one of them is subtracting one of these others from the other. So ideally, I would normally go to the state website, pull off 4 of their numbers, and use them to prove all the numbers on our warrant, the good old 13 and 14. This year, their numbers aren't out there, or at least I wasn't able to find them, so I'm not quite sure where you got the spreadsheet, the data that you have. But even so, having it be out there, it's not the spreadsheet that I usually pull the data from that is labeled a little differently than this other thing that we're working with. So that's yet another level of uncertainty on my part of the numbers that are going into 13 and 14, because I don't have that state spreadsheet out there at the moment that has those unambiguous 4 columns where those numbers come from. So now that I've cast plenty of doubt as to the whole thing, I leave it to you to figure out what the heck to do.
Right, well, I mean, it sounds like they tell you,
Yeah, they tell you exactly.
take out the nutrition, take out the state subsidy, and you're saying you can't find the state subsidy on the website.
I'm saying that the final figures that are normally out there are not.
Right,
At least as
so you
of
came up
4
with
days
the
ago.
state subsidy how?
Okay, between this sheet, okay, and the directions that went with it, and then pulling up the ED 279 and going to, like when it says ED 279 line 60, going to ED 279 line 60 and taking that number from this FY 13-14 current.
And the 279 information
279 is
was
sent to
was
you,
given us
right?
about 10 days ago or so? Yeah, about 10 days ago, I received the download from the state with these numbers.
And that still can be changed in the fall, correct?
Yeah.
That's just the number they give you to work for, so you can get your budget done, but
Right.
you don't know, you may get more or less once it comes to fall.
But it's the
And
benchmark
they take it
that
back
all
to
superintendents have been asking for it.
Yes.
And we were pleased that it wasn't any later than it was.
Anything else?
Thank you.
I said my piece.
Okay, thank you. All right, are we ready to vote on Article 13 and 14?
Yep.
Article 13,
Take it away, Mary. Judy and then Mary.
Moderator.
to see what sum the municipality will appropriate for the total cost of funding public education from kindergarten to grade 12 as described in the Essential Programs and Services Funding Act. $3,658,879. And to see what sum the municipality will raise as the municipality's contribution to the total cost of funding public education from kindergarten to grade 12 as described in the Essential Programs and Services Funding Act in accordance with the Maine Revised Statutes, Title 20A, Section 15688. I would look for Article 13 for a school committee recommendation in the amount of $3,311,963.
I'll make a motion to recommend $3,311,963. Wait, $3,311,963.
Second.
That's Mary and Kevin. Any further discussion on Article 13? All those in favor?
Mr. Aldrich, do you have additional copies of Article 13 and 14 minutes you have here?
Again,
Give them that
we
one.
didn't make up enough, then we made up
Right.
enough of the board.
Okay.
And I can get some more now because I think Mike fixed the copier, but
Thank you, Jeanette.
it was a misfeed, so I could only get 6. I can
Okay.
get more, I can get more now.
Okay. Now, do you want to share that, or do you still want her to go get more?
That's fine, you can share it. Or the state changes.
All set with Article 13? Let's go on to Article 14. To see what sum the municipality will raise and appropriate in additional local funds, recommending $1,317,098 that exceeds the state's essential programs and services allocation model by recommended $1,232,160 as required to fund the budget recommended by the school committee. I will look for the school committee to recommend $1,317,098 for additional local funds and give the following reasons for exceeding the state's essential programs and services allocation model by $1,232,160. $233,160. The essential programs and services does not fully support all the costs of K through 12 programs. These funds support programming not included in the essential programs and services model.
Can I say so moved?
I do.
You can.
Okay, what I am looking for is
Just recommend.
just
something.
a recommendation of $1,317,098.
All right, I'll make a motion to recommend $1,317,098.
Second.
Kevin, any further discussion on Article 14?
Do we need to recommend the second number? There's two numbers for recommendation.
No.
No?
It's the first one, we have to vote the money on.
What we're
The additional
voting on is
funds.
what we're going to raise in additional funds is the $1,317,098. The other numbers are saying what the state recommends. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Article 15 summarizes the budget to see what sum the town of Acton will authorize the school committee to expend for fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2014, correct?
Yeah.
And ending 2015.
Whoops.
Is that, those numbers look wrong.
Yeah. Just fix it. She's saying it right.
I just changed them.
Yep.
Mine.
Right.
2014 and through June 30, 2015, from the school department's contribution to the total cost of funding public education from kindergarten to grade 12 as described in the Essential Programs and Services Funding Act, non-state funded school construction projects, additional local funds for school purposes under the Maine Revised Statutes, Title 20A, Section 15690, unexpended balances, tuition receipts, state subsidy, and other receipts for the support of the school. And I'm looking for, under Article 15, for school committee to recommend a total amount of $5,096,253.
I'll make a motion to recommend $5,096,253.
I'll second that.
Mary and Jeanette. Any discussion on Article 15? All those in favor? The next two are not money articles. Shall the school committee, Article 16, shall the school committee be authorized to expend such other sums as may be received from federal or state grants or programs or other sources during the fiscal year for school purposes, provided that such grants, programs, or other sources do not require the expenditure of other funds not previously appropriated. And the school committee would recommend what, Mary?
I would make a motion to adopt the article as written.
Seconded.
Mary and Kevin to adopt the article. Any discussion? All those in favor? Article 17, to see if the town of Acton will appropriate the receipt of certain federal and state grants and carry any previous balances for the following special revenue accounts. Title 1A, local entitlement, small rural school, Title 2A, preschool, high school diploma.
I'll make a motion to adopt the article as written.
Seconded.
All those in favor? Article 18, to see if the town of Acton will vote to appropriate the following revenues, balance carried fund transfers, and to fund the food service budget in addition to amounts raised by taxation for food services in the school operating budget. School revenues are estimated to be, will be at $70,000.
School nutrition revenues.
School nutrition revenues.
I'll make a motion to adopt the article as written.
There is the next. All those in favor? Does anybody have anything else to bring before us tonight, Ted?
Yeah, Selectmen are going to add one more article to the warrant. We have just written a liquor license ordinance because we've never had one. As soon as it gets back from being proofread by the Liquor License Commission. And the only reason we're doing it now is all the liquor licenses for the 3 establishments come due in May. So if we wait till June, we can't do it for a whole nother year. We've never had an ordinance before. We only charge $100, and there's more than that just to advertise a public hearing. And then we're putting in the ability for our code enforcement and our fire department to go in and enforce regulations into these bars. So we are going to add it on to that meeting that night.
Question, is there a rescission period for that? Because there was with the Warrant and Finance Committee ordinance, which meant we couldn't use it in June. We had to wait a whole nother year after that.
I think it's not, I think it was 90 days, and we figured out because of when they're having their meeting, they're a lot earlier this year than they were last year, so I think we're good. That's why we decided to do it, but we'll have to count back on the days. But you guys are earlier this year, right, than you were last year for your town meeting. I think you were the end of August last year. I mean, the end of April.
We're still,
It is, still
the vote is the 29th.
Oh, it's still the 29th?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have to count that back while you're right, because we did have to wait a year, didn't we?
David.
The first meeting is the 22nd.
Question concerning the fund balance.
Right.
So, as we know, budgeting is tricky to say the least when you have enrollment numbers that are close to either being 1 class, 2 class. Under certain scenarios, if the unlikely scenario came about that we got a lot of kids, an influx of a lot of kids in a certain class, or we ended up identifying more special ed kids than foreseen or whatever, would the board be looking at the fund balance to take up some of those issues? Or how, is it considered that enough of a cushion to do that? I got thinking about it when Kim mentioned the fund balance. I mean, is that how we would look at it?
I think we can only spend what the town appropriates for us to spend.
Right. So you automatically would have to go back to the town?
Yes.
Yeah.
Even if it's to transfer.
Well, right, I
fund
understood,
balance.
okay, that was really my question. You just have to go to the town to transfer out of that. You could, but you could still, I guess, is that what your philosophy is? I mean, you see, the debate always at the municipal level was always, how much fund balance should we have? Remember, I mean, for years and years, this has been argued. How much is too much, how much of a pad is acceptable, how much is not acceptable, and it's always been up for debate. So that's where I'm going with, just trying to get a feel for it, where
And
some
I
of these
think as a
things
board, we've
happen.
tried in the past to stay with, to be as close as we could to what the auditors recommend for us.
Okay, yeah.
What Smith recommends, and they recommend that you have a minimum of a certain percentage of your budget.
Right.
And some years,
I don't want to put you on the
some years
spot.
we haven't
Do you
had.
know what the percentage is? I don't,
I
if
think
you
it's
don't, that's
three.
fine.
Formula.
3 or 4?
It's a formula, and it's usually like 3 or 4 months. But one of the things that Bill has asked, or that we're going to be working on after this process is done, we do not have a fund balance policy for this school,
Oh, I
and
see.
he's recommending to put a fund balance policy in place, but that will It'll be after this. After this. And then, but it's.
I'd like to comment that that's not something whereby this school has been slow in doing that. Every year, the accountants have new rules that they suggest will make things more secure for the public monies. And I went through that in New York last year when I was retiring, that we had to put a policy together to say what our guideline was as a school for the various kinds of fund balance designations, assigned fund balances. So this is new, in other words, new guidance from the accountants.
I would assume that in the process of that discussion, that the accountant will recognize that there is one undesignated fund balance in the town.
Right.
And that we wouldn't be creating one specifically for the school and specifically for the town and duplicating the effort here.
Right.
That's the only thing that would concern me.
Yeah, they told us to have 3 months, and we're at 1.1 million at the end of this past year, and we need 1.3 million for, and that's for school and town spending for 3 months.
But on the flip side of that, any money that has been designated for school use only
Right, right.
can only come out of that fund for school use.
It's just cash.
Right.
It's fungible up there.
One hand to the other.
The number is there, the number is there.
The thing about special ed, though, it's, when it started in the 70s, it started with a case in Rochester, New Hampshire. The family had a severely handicapped kid, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And they had put their child in a residential home out of state, and Rochester didn't want to pay for it. And so they took it and went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court told Rochester, New Hampshire, they will pay for it, even if they have to start selling their municipal property. So if we get a case of somebody in special ed that comes in, we have to pay for it, no matter what. I mean, we still have to go to ask the town to take it out of this fund or that fund, or we have to go to ask the town to borrow it. But we will have to support any special ed needs student that comes into the town that has, that we haven't budgeted for.
Any other comments or discussion?
Thanks to everybody for their hard work,
Thank you
especially
very much.
Kim and Ken with a bunch of stuff.
Kim and Ken,
Good job.
Ken.
thank you. KK.
K squared.
K squared. When I look at this formula page that you were working on from the State Department, it kind of just gives me a headache just to look at it. Never mind trying to figure out what all the things are that go in there.
Now, speaking for Kim and myself, we're very pleased that you chose us to help lead the district. And we hope that this example of what we can do is just the beginning. So
It is.
now that my other administrators are on the same tact in trying to raise it's one thing to raise the money, but the next thing is to raise the standards. And so this job just moves to the next, and we're ready to tackle that too.
All right, thank you very much. Then I will look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
And I have, Jim and I have nomination papers here if anybody would like to sign them.